Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Atlantic Conference 2009, the definitive gathering of world experts on the possibility of early transatlantic voyaging. At the Atlantic Conference, you will see the latest research from those in the field and get to meet and chat with them live. We're certain that you will walk away thinking what many are beginning to understand. The Atlantic Ocean was crossed long before Columbus, and by many cultures and peoples. The Atlantic Conference 2009.
Most people know Scott Wolter from his groundbreaking work on the Kensington runestone, which the word I like to use is he resurrected the reputation of a man along with that, Olaf Ullmann, and put the stone in what is now widely believed and accepted as its correct dating and its correct story. And along the way, you found some interesting symbols, and that's what we're here to talk about today, Scott.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure where you'd like me to begin, but...
Take us through your presentation, because yours is interesting. You actually gave this to our much smaller group up in Halifax last year. You've probably since given it every weekend of the year, I imagine. I know you do a lot of public speaking, so...
Well, yeah, and you want to start with the runestone, or you want to jump to the hooked X? I guess I usually start with the runestone because really that serves as the foundation for the hooked X and really for my work. And just as a background, I'm a geologist. I run a materials forensic laboratory in St. Paul, Minnesota. Basically, what I do is perform autopsies on concrete and rock, and I've been doing that for about 24 years. But about 10 years ago, the Kensington runestone came into my lab, and at that time, I didn't know what it was. And we jumped on it and did our analysis, and that's where it all started. And I think what's important to know is that by conducting weathering studies with tombstones that had like mineralogy to the runestone, I was able to come to the conclusion that the weathering of the inscription was older than 200 years, and that's from the date that it was pulled out of the ground in 1898. So the claims that people have made for the last 111 years now that the stone was a late 19th century hoax is impossible. Therefore, what I like to say, it becomes a logic exercise, and since in my mind nobody has been able to come up with a plausible explanation for any other origin going back from the late 1600s, which is where the geological work put it, then to me the only plausible explanation is it must be genuine. And since it says 1362, in my mind that means that everything in that inscription must be consistent with the 14th century. At that point, I spent a few years working with a man by the name of Dick Nielsen, who's a linguist, an expert in Old Swedish, and through the combination of his work digging through the Scandinavian literature on runes and Old Swedish, and my work in the field over in Sweden and specifically on Gotland, we found everything. Everything, that is, except for one symbol. But I think linguistically what's important to understand about the inscription is that the language, the runes, the dialect, the grammar, and the dating, including the medieval Easter table dating method, is all found on Gotland. And I think if you want to call something the magic bullet, or really the final definitive proof that the runestone is indeed a medieval artifact, that would be something called the dotted R. And this is a very rare runic trait that indicates a change in the language that was coalescing at that time, and they used these different changes in sounds by making a mark, in many cases a simple dot. But in the case of the dotted R, it was unknown by modern scholars until 1935, when it was discovered in a couple of inscriptions. And sure enough, it appears on the runestone, and the question then became, if it wasn't known, if the dotted R wasn't known until 1935 by modern scholars, how did it get on the Kensington runestone in 1898? And so really that's the that's the final proof there. That's the that pinpoints it. So at that point, we felt that we had pretty much everything figured out. In addition, we went back and investigated the claims by the opponents. What were they saying? The reasons were why this was a hoax, and we looked into everything, including the so-called deathbed confession. And the bottom line is there's nothing there. And in my mind, I guess I wasn't totally surprised by this, because if it's indeed a medieval artifact, how can there be factual evidence to prove that it's not? That's not possible, and indeed it doesn't exist. So that's where we stand on that. And then Dick and I wrote a book that was published in November of 2004, soon to be 4 years ago now, called The Kensington Runestone, Compelling New Evidence. And it's a big book, but as I said, we wanted to literally leave no stone unturned. Sorry about the pun, but we felt we really had to investigate every avenue, every angle, and I think that stands on its own. At that point, Dick went down one road to pursue continuing to work with academics, and what I decided to do and continue to do is research the one and only thing on the runestone that we were unable to find either in the runic record or on the grave slabs and other runic inscriptions in Gotland, and that's something called the hooked X, which is an X-like symbol that has a slight modification on the upper right arm, what we call a little hook, that's being used for the A sound on the Kensington runestone. And that symbol was not the standard rune that the scholars or Dicker and I expected, quite frankly. So this was a mysterious thing, and I have spent the last 4 years delving into that mysterious symbol, trying to figure out what it might be. And I just now am releasing a book called The Hooked X, Key to the Secret History of North America, where I give my take on what I think that symbol means.
And okay, folks in the listening audience can look up near the middle of your screen there, and you'll see a link, the actual image of the front cover of the book, and it's also a link if you want to buy it, which we highly encourage. It's a great book, Scott.